pick a spot back here in the corner out of the way. I think probably part of what these things is from a pushback against it, as opposed to because she is so heavily, she's so biased, she's always in that mode, and I think the pushback really is just her the eyesight. I know. Yeah, me too.
We'd start off, Joe, and in our hearts, we would end up, it's just, I know the word of God.
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, to echo
I miss our console.
yeah.
This is the one more. Still pursues us. He pursues me. So worthy.
You have hands now.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
guys be in the middle. You two be in the middle.
Yeah,
You two sit there.
Get everybody in.
I don't sit.
yeah, we'll stand. And I haven't seen
Everyone to scooch all the way down.
get everyone underneath the tent.
Anyone who needs to sit. We are live streaming, so if you don't see on the camera.
Anything else we like? Sorry.
Thank you.
Roger, sit in here. There's plenty. Sit down.
On an emotional day, it wouldn't be seen as a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of
Wisdom, please have a seat.
Yes.
We're about to begin our service. If I could ask,
everyone to please
take a
moment to
make sure that
your cell phones
are
are
on
their
silent
silent.
mode. Conduct
Conducting our service today is Rabbi Michael.
Summer. The act of Kriya, or the act of tearing, is as old as biblical times.
Back then, at the death of a loved one, they would tear their clothing and wear ash on their head.
The act
Come forward
as a ribbon that a mourner wears to show
friends and family that there is.
in the period of mourning that a death has befallen the family, so that friends and family may approach them with sympathy.
Bless you, Lord our God, judge.
Esaina El Harim, Esaina El Harim, Me'ain Yavo Yavo Ezri, Me'ain Yavo Yavo Ezri. The psalmist in those ancient words wrote, I lift my eyes to the mountains, what is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, God is your protector at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming now and forever. A poet wrote, what is the measure of a man? His measure is the kind words people say when he isn't there, and the memories he creates that stay indelible in the minds of all who knew him. What is the measure of a man? It is the amount of love he leaves in people's hearts, and the laughter he leaves upon people's lips. What is the measure of a man? It is the length of time he is remembered, his good deeds and his kind words. Measured in the length of years, stories of his best moments and loving kindness get told by family and loved ones alike. Living an incredible life of 86 years where everyone remembers your sense of humor, accomplishments, and stories is a good life. It doesn't mean anyone will miss you less. It just means everyone will remember you with a smile at all you brought into this world. Alan Comm lived a good life, surrounded by the people he loved. A brilliant architect his entire career, a wonderful husband, father, grandfather, and friend. Alan lived the best life he knew how throughout his years. Today we celebrate Alan's life while mourning his absence. Son of Rachel and Benjamin of blessed memory, husband of Gloria of blessed memory for over 42 years, father of Joel, Michael and Paula, Cindy and Michael, loving grandfather of Zach, Joshua, Sarah, Jenna, and Grant, loving brother of Daniel and Gwendolyn, both of blessed memory. We are blessed with the lives we share. May Alan's memory always be a blessing, as we celebrate the memory of his life. The Byrds made these ancient words of Ecclesiastes popular when they sang that there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away. I'm not sure Alan ever got to that moment. A time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak. And now we speak of Alan's incredible life as I call his son Michael to speak of his father.
Well, it's been quite a week for me. From last week turning 16, being surprised what's going on now. So, though I do have few words, which is unusual for me. My father was always a quiet mystery for me growing up. I never really felt that close to him, and he seemed occupied with his work. As I got older and had kids of my own, I strived to connect with him, but there's still wanted a closeness in the last few years. I hope for an understanding and or a relationship, especially after his wife Gloria passed away. This was not to be due to many circumstances of COVID and dementia. I tried to be a good caregiver and gave him more than he gave me, or I thought. He gave me a lesson in life. The last years he has taught me things in his own way. I've learned about compassion. I've learned about death with dignity. I've learned that just showing up and doing the best you can sometimes is good enough. And I've learned about quiet, unrequited love. Yeah, as they say nowadays, peace out, Dad. Thanks for the memories. Love, Michael.
I invite our son Joel to speak of his father.
Dad approved of me moving to Puerto Rico, so this is all on one of y'all. I don't know who it is. I am not a man of few words. I have, on the plane in, after getting back home to the beach and being there for one day and turning around and coming back, I just sat down and this is what came out, and I let it sit as it is. When I ponder my fondest memories of my father, I invariably go to the innocence of childhood when I respected him just because he was my father. Trips to the Museum of Science and Industry, a Saturday afternoon at Wrigley Field, playing catch in the front yard, building a train set in the basement, gathering with family poolside, all of these things provided me with fulfillment and happiness. He always seemed happy to entertain my whims, whether buying me a Lowry organ so I could develop my limited musical skills, allowing my band to set up in the backyard and make a racket, setting up the movie projector so we could watch silent home movies in the family room, taking Michael and I on a cruise into Disney post-divorce, grudgingly tolerating the horrific odors that would emanate from our chemistry set in the basement, and welcoming a daughter and a dog into his home with the woman he loved. He was usually a pretty good sport about it all, except when he was working in the basement and Rusty would run across the floor. That irritated the crap out of him. The future path for his kids was always of paramount importance. A college education was always assumed to be part of our lives, and if there was something he could do to support our lives as young adults with our new spouses and his grandchildren, he would do it. I wouldn't have been able to build out my first home office in Plano, Texas without his financial assistance. I know that he and Gloria provided help when needed for Michael and Cindy as well. To quote Sinatra, mistakes he made a few. Both my brother and I observed and experienced some things we wish we hadn't, and with Michael's experiences being more severe than my own. Without attempting to psychoanalyze Dad's childhood, it's only as an adult that I can fully understand the devastation he experienced at the end of his marriage to our mother. Some of the choices he made were reflective of the hurt and pain he withstood. I forgive him for those choices as I can empathize with that pain. Perhaps it was watching him go through it and make some of those unhealthy choices that allowed me to navigate my own pain in a more constructive manner. Dad was, as we all are, imperfect. A lot of things can be said about Alan Comm, but perhaps the greatest thing I could say is that he was good. He did his best to do right by his family, his employers, his clients, his friends. Flawed as we all are, sometimes he fell short of his aspirations, but his intentions were most often right and good. Mary, my first wife, always loved my father and would call him Pops. She reminded me this week how much he loved her parents, Carl and Velma, and would look forward to getting together with them when visiting us in Texas or visiting their home in Oklahoma. There was something about the simplicity of the people and the 5 acres in Tuttle that brought Dad sincere joy and happiness. Carl and Velma felt likewise about Dad and Gloria, always asking me about them and saying kind things. It's true that in the end he didn't have friends or too much extended family stand with him. It's easy to point fingers and place blame, but life is so much more complex than the motives we tend to ascribe to others' behavior. While on the surface it may appear that he and Gloria isolated themselves from others, I've also come to recognize a virtue in Alan's choices to not pursue relationships with others. That virtue was his single-minded attentiveness to his wife Gloria. Her long-lasting illness appeared to define their relationship in many respects. Insulin, blood sugar, cancer, hospital visits, mood swings, and more were a regular part of their days together. It was challenging and scary, but Alan's love for Gloria caused him to be hyper-focused on making sure she was okay. A price was paid, but something special was also gained. He loved her deeply, and he dedicated himself to actively loving her through all her trials, which became his trials. He carried her burdens on himself as best he could. The truth is, I did not have the kind of relationship that every child longs for with his father. His inability to connect with myself and my brother on a deep emotional level left a hole in my heart. I feel fortunate that years ago I developed a firm spiritual footing that found God filling the hole in my heart. But he designed fatherhood, and even with his love, there was still always sadness for what could have been with my earthly father. As I look through photos from the past 58 years of my life, my favorite pictures are the ones where Dad is being goofy or genuinely happy to be where he was at that moment. Just a week ago, Sunday, I visited with Dad after he rebounded from his heart attack and visit to the hospital. He was more present during that visit than any time I can recall from the past few years. His countenance was happy, there was light in his eyes, and a smile on his face. The pictures I took with him during that visit are now my favorites. Dad just didn't know how to love in many ways, but one of his highest values was to provide for his family. It was his goal to leave behind a legacy that would provide for his children and his grandchildren. On one hand, focusing on material possessions could be seen as shallow. On the other hand, for those who grew up without, it can be life-changing. And while his 3 children have managed to make their way without requiring financial support, the fact that this mattered to him is a good thing. And his grandchildren will most certainly benefit from that legacy in ways that could be quite liberating. The bottom line is Dad was as human as they come and did the best he could. I love him for that, and I pray that he and Gloria are now reunited. I imagine that as he made his way into the light, he could hear the voice screaming, "Alan, get over here!" Only now, she doesn't require his attention at every turn, except for him to tell her again and again how beautiful she is. That's all she really wanted, and he was always happy to oblige. Vaya con Dios is how they say it in Spanish. Go with God, Dad, and be at peace. Thank you for giving it your best shot. I love you.
I'd like to thank the family for sharing all of these stories with me yesterday. Alan was born in Chicago, growing up in Albany Park and Rogers Park. He graduated from Sullivan High School and was proud to be a graduate of the University of Illinois School of Architecture in Champaign. Alan felt that it was his destiny to become an architect, joining the family legacy and path set by his father and brother before him. He was surrounded by art, hand drawings, designs, and blueprints all his life, from beginning to end. He was so proud of the several heritage buildings his father had designed here in Chicago, and that fact that his brother designed and built so many beautiful buildings, including a lot of high-rises by Lincoln Park Zoo, just inspired him to follow them. After he graduated, he worked and learned by his brother's side until he finally went out on his own and built a career designing homes and pools for families throughout the Chicago suburbs. Michael and Joel, when you came into the world, it was so important that you all attended the University of Illinois as well. Heck, he made sure you dressed up as Chief Illini as often as possible. And you remembered finally being taken to the 1984 Rose Bowl to see UCLA whoop Illinois. Joel, you remember how when you were kids, your dad put drafting tables in each of your rooms. Those were your desks, in case you might be inspired to also become architects. Cindy, you remembered how your mom and Alan were set up by your mom's co-workers. They had met previously at a Comm wedding. They had numerous conversations on the phone, and then Alan finally came to the house, and the two spent hours commiserating and setting up more meetings. Cindy, you remembered Alan as a good man, a great husband, and caregiver to Gloria, who sadly died in 2019. Alan was always so compassionate and moved mountains and earth for his beloved Gloria. In their lives together, no matter how outspoken or colorful she was, Alan always rolled with it and allowed her all the forms of entertainment that she loved. Alan didn't mind always taking a back seat to Gloria's direction and loud force. She made sure they were at every event, every moment for the lives of the grandchildren and Alan was always there standing beside her, taking it all in. He was the silence behind the powerful woman. Michael, you remembered them as such content homebodies. They loved sitting home and watching TV together. All they needed was each other. They loved each other's company, they talked a lot, and enjoyed conversing together. Joel, you remembered how they loved traveling when they were younger and healthier, seeing the world together. They always came to Texas to visit and watch your kids grow up, and they loved all the times in Oklahoma. Cindy, you talked about how your mom loved jewelry and was always so flamboyant. Alan just loved her being herself, even if that wasn't his style. You described him as a great father to you and grandfather Grant. You remember trips to the Wisconsin State Fair, going on the rides into the petting zoo, your trip to Disney World and attending the Barry Manilow concert. Together there were great memories as well. Alan loved Rusty the dog and loved singing with Rusty whenever he howled in for the happy birthday or any song being sung. Cindy, you also remembered how Alan helped you when you sold your first house and explained to the buyer how he could repurpose it to their needs. He loved coming over for Halloweens with Grant. Josh, you remembered how your grandpa loved sports, especially watching the Illini play and taking you to see the games. You two loved watching together. He loved when you took him to the Futures game with your dad at the All-Star Festival for baseball, the World team versus the USA team. He loved seeing all the future All-Stars, and you all had a great time. Zach, you recalled when you were young, the main room on the upper floor was your grandpa's drafting room, and you weren't allowed in there. Eventually it became a privilege to be allowed access to the room. You were enamored with all the scatters of paper everywhere. It was like a disaster area. Every surface was covered with the architectural drafts and blueprints. You found it fascinating to learn indirectly from watching how the blueprints worked. Jenna, you remembered as a child, every Christmas and birthday, a gift always arrived. When your grandparents visited, they would take you all to Toys R Us every time and just watch as you ran around and picked your favorite things. You thought it was the sweetest, most thoughtful thing they did for you all. Sarah, one of your favorite memories was visiting with your grandpa at Brookdale. You would just sit there quietly until he would open up and tell you about when he was younger and his job as an architect. The history was so fascinating. He loved showing you pictures of his work and favorite buildings in the city. Alan just never had a desire to retire. He was doing what he loved until he couldn't do it anymore. Your visits allowed him to relive some of his most cherished accomplishments. Mike, you described how Alan was such a good artist. You remembered 3 or 4 hand renderings of resorts he had rendered years ago. Alan was so talented and had such an artistic eye and style. Paul, you described how there were such subtleties with how Alan acknowledged his relationship with each of you. Alan couldn't always wrap his mind around your skills, accomplishments, and the true size of your job. Yet over the years, he would always ask you to review their medical health care in true respect to your expertise. It was his way of saying how much he trusted and appreciated you without saying the words. Paula, you also described how for 5 years while Alan and Gloria lived in Brookdale, Cindy, you and Michael would religiously go weekly to be with them. Of course, Gloria would always let you know if you hadn't visited. Michael, you'd visit every Sunday, going over and engaging with your dad, trying to get him to talk about his past. When COVID slowed, you'd bring Alan to your house for Sunday football until he just couldn't do it anymore. You all remembered how Alan was the bad dad joke champion, as if he invented the category. He loved showing you all the small picture he had of his pride and joy in his wallet, his dishwasher detergent. He loved coming home and watching the Rockford Files and eating ice cream from the carton. Last week he was complaining he didn't have enough ice cream to Paula. And Aaron, you remarked how he had complained Sunday about the ice cream too, saying it was too runny, not frozen enough. And Josh, you remember your grandpa drinking Miller Lite and eating cookies. He loved this combination while watching TV, eating crappy cookies while drinking his crappy beer. And Cindy, you remarked how he also loved pickled herring and cheap wine. What a great combination. And Sarah, you remember the one time he made you run to the store for his cheap wine. At the checkout with your 2 huge bottles of jug wine at 22, the clerk thought you were insane. You definitely felt judged and were like, these aren't for me. Your grandpa loved his Gallo and Rossi jugs of wine. And Cindy, whenever Alan was coming over for his weekly visits, he'd ask you to make sure you have a case of Milwaukee's Best. Then graduated to Coors, we think symbolically, when Joel moved to Colorado. He'd always claim, but it's light beer. You all commented on Alan's incredible rally just a week ago. 3 good days of him being the best he'd been in a long while. He got to hang out with you and hang out with Rufus, of course. It was the best final 3 days you could ask for. In living, we all try to make the world a better place. We try to make a difference wherever we go. Alan certainly made a difference in all of your lives. May we always remember the best of Alan in his strength, health, and his incredible sense of humor. May his memory always be a blessing, as he was such a blessing in your lives. The poet Merritt Malloy wrote, "When I die, give what's left of me away. Give it to children and old people who wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother and sister walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved, and if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not on your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away." You may either stay seated because you're comfortable and warm, or you may rise if you wish for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Torim, Kizohar Kiyamasirim, Et Nishmat Avram ben Binyamin v'Rachel, Shalach Lolamo, Ba'al Rachamim Yasirehu, V'Seter Kanafav Lolamim, V'Yitzor HaChaim et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachlato, V'Yanuach B'Shalom, Al Mishkavo V'Nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Alan Comm, son of Rachel and Benjamin, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence and in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We continue in the folders as we turn to the 23rd Psalm, and we read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We may remain standing as we conclude this moment with the mourner's Kaddish before we continue with lowering and vaulting. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach roteh v'yamnich malchoteh, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayedechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'maru, amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudusha barichu, le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'maru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'maru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'maru, amen. May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort to all the bereaved among us as we say together, amen. You may be seated. We will continue with the lowering and vaulting. When it comes time to place earth into the grave, it's one of the few mitzvahs, few positive commandments that can never be repaid. So it's become tradition to place 3 scoopfuls of sand into the grave to show the love and devotion with which you come to this task we wish we did not have to do. We pray silently.
very slippery, so make sure to stay in the grass as you take your scoop towards birth. Place some imagery. Invite family and friends to rise.
We're going to allow the family to come forward first and place their measures of earth. Please stay behind the black pail as instructed. Also, please be very mindful of your footing near the edge of the grave.
I'll get you. I'll get her. It's okay. I'll take her.
that you've participated, you can either step behind underneath the tent again, or please step back so everyone else can place some earth. Suggesting that if the gentleman from the cemetery are going to complete the burial with the equipment, if you would like to stay and witness that, we ask that you please step back, probably to where you are now. If you find this upsetting in any way, we would ask that you please go back to the cars at this time.